I'm Molly Bloom. Do you know about me?
I read your indictment after I got your call last night, and I bought your book.
Do you understand that you are charged with operating an illegal gambling business?
Are you taking me on as a client?
I don't think I can convince my partners to take a flyer on the poker princess.
If you think a princess can do what I did, you're incorrect. I'm getting that you don't think much of me, but what if every single one of your ill-informed, unsophisticated opinions about me were wrong?
I'd be amazed.
You have found your way to a brand new episode of The Film Board from The Next Reel on rashpixel.fm. We spoil movies, and tonight's brand new episode for the brand new year is about Molly's Game, even though its limited release was on Christmas, technically. Its wide release was this week on January 5th, so it's likely showing in your neighborhood theater right now. Now, as a tribute to this movie being Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, he also wrote the screenplay. Tonight we're going to try and find out which one of us sounds the most Sorkin-y. I don't think I'm going to win it, but let's say hello to the thugs of the moment. How much Sorkin do you have in your bag, Steve Sarmento?
Oh, only when I'm doing the walking and talking for exposition purposes.
Which we'll talk about tonight for sure. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, I don't know if I would ever be able to compete with anything in Sorkin's world.
Yeah, he's and there's a lot of writing I think that we're going to have to talk about with Molly's Game and some of the other films that he's done too. I'm JJ, and though I don't know a whole lot about Aaron Sorkin in particular, it's quite possible that I went to school with Molly Bloom. Andy, you too, right?
It is entirely possible.
I'm not sure what year she graduated from CU, but the timing in this movie, which I didn't expect going in, it makes it seem like it might sync up with a bunch of us Buffalo thugs that are involved with the podcast. So that might be interesting. And I don't think you can find our college transcripts anywhere, but you can find out generally more information about all of us and this show and all of its sibling shows at thenextreel.com. Also, come follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, which I just started getting back into, at The Next Reel, to catch quick hits about the fun stuff we're doing and other fun stuff in the film industry, and even some other just generally fun stuff. It's all very fun, but literally the most fun you can have with us is by supporting The Next Reel on Patreon and get access to the show drafts feed and other special ways to interact with us beyond the podcast itself. Check it out at patreon.com/thenextreel. Okay, I wanted to kick off our initial thoughts tonight with an anecdote from the most popular review for this movie on Letterboxd. One guy named Evan wrote out Google's definition of heaven and then defined heaven for himself as sitting in a theater listening to Jessica Chastain speak Sorkin dialogue for 140 minutes. So how heavenly did the Chastain and Sorkin connection hit you, Andy?
I loved it. I had an incredible time watching this film, seeing this story unfold. Jessica Chastain is one of those performers who can play such interesting characters on screen that completely absorb me. This was certainly one of them, much like Miss Sloane that she had just done, or Zero Dark 30 that we also had talked about on the show. She's a really powerful actress and does such compelling roles in great films. This was I think a great step for her, doing something with Aaron Sorkin and playing such an interesting character that really kind of defines the power that a person can bring into their life, but also the randomness of the world and how it can cause you to tumble. I loved it.
Ah, cool. And so Miss Sloane, we did Miss Sloane for Trailer Rewind too.
That's right, yes.
We're covering Jessica Chastain in a couple of interesting ways. How about you, Steve? What was it like for you?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole Miss Sloane connection was right there because of just the voiceover narration monologue. I mean, the whole opening sequence of her just narrating sort of her whole sports history piece just really set the tone for the movie. And I thought, I am so up for this. I just, the delivery of the dialogue, the way, just the art of her style of acting with this just really set high expectations for me from the get-go, but it really just set the tone and it carried me all the way through. I think we can, there's some interesting structural pieces we can talk about because we've got several time frames and how Sorkin manages all the different stories and characters. But as far as, what he's known for, which is his dialogue, he sets that for you right up front there of what to expect with this. And just, for me, was a joyous ride all the way through to the end.
Well, that's awesome. And I feel similarly about the story for sure. I really liked the movie. It was completely enjoyable to me, and I didn't really have problems with any piece of it. But other than that, I didn't find it particularly remarkable in many ways. Going with the story, I didn't know anything about Molly's backstory. I was shocked to find out that I might have gone to school with her. That was something that I was like, wow, oh yeah, you're Jeremy Bloom's brother, which interestingly enough is kind of or sister, and interestingly enough is kind of a point of the movie that she's dealt with in her life. So that kind of stuff was interesting to me. The history and the way that it was delivered, the way that the story was delivered was really great. For me, in general, looking at the film and what it was as a movie, it seemed generally unremarkable to me. So I find myself kind of talking about them as two separate entities when I'm looking at how to evaluate this movie. It didn't feel like there was enough specialness from a movie standpoint for me with this, but I'm really happy that I watched it, and I think it's a great movie to go out there and see, especially because potentially we might get some award buzz surrounding this movie because of all of the people involved and what's going on with it as well. So in moving on to sort of talking points about this movie, for me, looking at the story and what was going on with how it was being delivered, it kind of got to have three separate pieces for me. And I felt like Sorkin actually treated these different pieces a little bit differently in terms of style. And the three pieces that I really keyed in on was the internal family psychology with Molly and her father and how the family operated, Molly's personal life story, so moving from the family on to everything else, and then the legal drama, which really kind of is the crux of the story, why the book came out originally, the Molly's Game book, and the sort of case that the country is putting against Molly in terms of her poker game. Which of those pieces of the story point seemed to be the focal point for you guys? Did you have one story that you seemed to key in on that, or was it just kind of was it taking it in as a whole for you guys?
I think it's a little tricky to completely pinpoint because for me, it really did the way the each of those stories kind of folded into each other. I think made for kind of one complete whole. That being said, I think these particular story beat that I really latched onto more than any was her relationship with her father. That really comes out in the ice skating sequence that we have. That I found to be an incredibly powerful moment that defined so much of everything in her life, and the way that like her father pushed her, but also the way that she reacted to things and pushed herself. And for me, I would say that was kind of the key element, and that moment gave me a lot of additional perspective on a lot of the other bits throughout the film.
See, for me, that whole ice skating, it was a little bit, I don't know, just too on the nose with so many things, I guess, because her father says, okay, we're going to do 3 years of therapy in 3 minutes. So to me, that's the writer saying, hey, I'm going to just condense a bunch of stuff because I've already gone 2 hours. And to me, it was just a little bit too convenient it's an emotional moment. And to me, as a father of 2 daughters, and, that whole moment of I'm going to find somebody to find that guy because nobody hurts my daughter, was, emotionally was very powerful. But for me, I'm looking at it from, the writer's perspective. And for me, what I think, Sorkin was focusing on was, and I felt were the most well-written parts. I think the parts that were most enjoyable were the scenes with Molly and her lawyer. So you've got Idris Elba and Jessica Chastain, and for me, those were the moments. Those were all the big scenes. That's where it was like he let loose with just, his Sorkin-esque dialogue. I know the movie's marketed as this, whole poker thing, and that is there. But to me, it was really about the dynamics of those two characters. He's reluctant to take her on. He eventually does. He's trying to he's trying to unpack her and figure out how she works or why she's making these decisions. And to me, that's the compelling part of the story, is him trying to understand her. Why she's got all this information. She could have sold the book rights and made millions of dollars. She hasn't done that. Why is she playing the game the way she's playing? She's putting herself in the worst situations ever. For what reason, he doesn't understand. And the sort of following along that and him sort of starting to realize what her motivations are, or her reasons for making these decisions. That's to me the true story and of what this movie is really about.
Well, that's interesting. And I guess that's why I kind of wanted to bring it up. I think I fall a little bit more with Andy on this one in terms of the family psychology piece. I was kind of just trucking along with the story in a really sort of documentarian kind of way up until the ice skating scene. I didn't have an emotional connection to the movie until it went into that family psychology bit. And I think that, it's interesting that Sorkin's going, that Sorkin made this movie when I think that, like a lot of the people talk about Steve Jobs, the Sorkin Steve Jobs movie, and they talk about that really the purpose of that movie was to show that while he was a great innovator, that he was also kind of a crappy dad. So you talk about these daddy issues kind of thing, and I thought that this was that I wasn't really into the movie, to be honest, until that point. So I like, Steve, that you have a different take on that, and that that those scenes with Idris Elba were able to kind of get you to a different level with that as well. You talk about the dialogue, the Sorkin-esque dialogue in those pieces, and how it relates to the poker game, I think is interesting because, we look at this and I think about like Mamet writing Heist or something like that, where it's really where those moments in particular, those interactions between Molly and Chaffee, Idris Elba and Jessica Chastain, I think really kind of show the thing of where all of a sudden Sorkin reveals himself as this is how dialogue is done in a Sorkin environment, and we're going to apply it to poker, or we're going to apply it to the legal drama there. And I think that was really evident in those scenes. Did you guys feel like the poker played an important role in the movie?
Oh, sure. I mean, I definitely think it was. And it was interesting. It was entertaining. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that worked really nicely through those sequences about, her kind of creating and running this world. But again, for me, it was just, so much of it was about, not so much just about poker itself, but about her as somebody who was kind of coming into power as a woman who could control and kind of create these environments. And that's what I took out of it. It wasn't even really a poker movie, other than the fact that the whole movie in a way is kind of, this elaborate poker game as you're watching these cards get played in her life and everything. But I found it to be a really interesting element. And what I think for me was most interesting about the poker sequences is the people who came in and out of her life and ended up being those frozen pine branches, I guess you could say, that kind of would trip her up and push her into different directions.
Yeah, that's interesting there too. I found, we talk about the poker being part of the movie, but not being the focus. On Amazon, as I was looking for sort of resources on this movie, the other suggestions were all card movies. It brought up Rounders as a suggestion to, like, if you like Molly's Game, and I feel like that's missing the point. I think the things that we're talking about, the legal drama, the parental psychology there, I think that's more of what this movie is really getting into.
Yeah, this is a poker movie, but if you look at what Aaron Sorkin has done over his past few the films he's written, you've got the Steve Jobs movie, you've got Moneyball, you've got The Social Network. He's, to me, really proven adept at taking a story that's based on actual events and then, yes, adapting it from a book or from some other source material, but then also making it his own to make a specific point about that person. Because, Steve Jobs, everybody's read the biography or whatever, and, he made some choices to take that story and focus on, these 3 days and cram everything in. So, the loyalty to the actual events that truly happened and having the ability to now manipulate those to serve the story that he wants to tell or the message that he wants to communicate. To me, that's what this is. It's not a poker movie. Poker is just one part of the story of, to me, what he keyed in Oz was, who is Molly Bloom? Why is her story interesting? And that's the question I had when I walked in, because I'd read the first half of her book and sort of gave up because it wasn't compelling writing. And I thought, okay, what did he see in this story that he was going to bring? Because I knew it was not going to be a straight adaptation of her book. That would just not be very entertaining at all. It was, you just have this sequential biographical narrative of like, this happened. That's not going to make for a compelling film. What's interesting, the choice that he made, as far as I can tell from the chronology that I can figure out, is the way things played out in her life was, yes, there was the initial, FBI piece. Then the book did not come out till after the second hearing, which is what we see in the movie. That's everything with Idris Elba in that case. That happened in 2014, and the outcome of that happened, and then her book came out. By moving that hearing after the publication of the book allows, I think what he's doing is gives the characters the ability to now comment on her story, because it's now in the past. They can talk about the book. Her attorney Jaffe, Idris Elba, can talk about the book and events, and they have a conversation about a story that's already happened. And to me, that was I think the key to cracking this story was she's had some events that happened in her life. Now we're able to step aside from those a little bit and look at them from a distance, as opposed to her book still being like really fresh with dealing with the outcome of everything. And to me, that was the shift, and why I feel like that's why I felt that was the story he wanted to tell. In the book, there's nothing about her attorney or anything. I mean, unless she gets to that at the last half of the book, it's really about, here's my story. I was the skier. Here's how I got involved in these poker things. There's not the sort of objective commentary. And to me, that's what makes this really work.
Well, and looking at a screenplay and what a writer brings to it, particularly with a biopic like this, I think it says a lot about Aaron Sorkin and his ability to hone in on those particular elements within the story and find the way to tell this story in a way that for me was incredibly effective. It wasn't just, starting in, her skiing career and then just kind of chronologically moving along through it. The way that Sorkin found to structure this screenplay, I think speaks as highly of him as a writer as his dialogue. It was a very tricky script to find the way to get that flow moving back and forth throughout her life. And I think it was a really effective way to deliver what we get here.
Yeah, I think that's great too. And one of the things that we've kind of tossed out as a thing to talk about is the idea of small things that change people's lives, right? And that's really sort of the way, the frame at which this is set up, and that's done by Sorkin, by the screenwriter in this, right? In we can take a look really from just talking about the first shot to the last shot. We're talking about the snow and her life before, and then the last shot of the film is a tilt down to reveal this pine branch that she describes early in the film about why they're there, that changed her life wholly. And that whole concept is something that comes from the script. So I think I agree with that. I think that's really insightful, and the story is told in a really interesting way. I think the point that you make, Steve, about inserting or changing the timeline for the effect of creating the interesting character drama between Chaffee and Molly, about why didn't you name more names and things like that, and leading to the ultimate sort of redemption of their relationship as he goes on to defend her. I think it's super important, and I think those are really smart choices to make in the way to tell the story in the script. What else, Steve? What else can you tell us about how the book hit you?
I mean, any typical person cannot really step outside themselves to be objective about their story. So you're getting a very much biased version of her story. She's got a reason to tell her story, and I don't know what that reason was. I mean, in the book, she names a lot more names, so there's a lot more celebrity names that are thrown around. Oh yeah, no. If you do a little bit of Googling, you'll see. I mean, Tobey Maguire is pretty much Player X. I mean, he's in the book. He is the one that is really, the poker fiend that is really driven. He in her book, she says he's the one that's got this like the auto shuffler machine, and he like lets her borrow it to use in the games and all of that. But as she presents it, as things go along, he starts becoming a little bit more aggressive and assertive and wanting to manipulate the game a little bit, and so those things come out. So player X, is pretty much Tobey Maguire, but she also names like I think like Ben Affleck and Leonardo DiCaprio. She names some of the like New York guys. So there's a lot of names that aren't changed in the book, which I was surprised in the movie, because in the book she says it's the Viper Club, it's not the Cobra Club. She says it's the Cobra. Yeah, so she names specific places. Now there may be a few names she's changed, but she's in the book. It's really caught up in a lot of the details of the poker, and she's really walking through the steps of how she went from as we see working for this guy. He wants her to start running these games for him, and then how she uses that as a launching pad. All of that part of that poker story pretty much followed along with her book of, eventually he fires her. She's like, great, I'm going to go start the games on my own. And it starts to become bigger and bigger. And that's when things start to get a little bit out of control. So that's right there with the book. There was nothing in there about her father or relationships with her father, really. I mean, brief, little bit of setup about her brothers and all that. Yeah, my mom saw this, earlier in the week, and she, was like, hey, should I go out and read the book? I really enjoyed the movie. I'm like, no, do not read the book, because it is not like the movie at all. I mean, Sorkin sets up in the beginning so many things as she's doing her little history about the ski slope. I mean, all the details, it's at a 35-degree angle, which is the same as the pyramids. And he's starting to use, visual graphics to convey information. And he's introducing that early on. And he's going to come back to that as he's got to explain poker. So he's getting the audience acquainted with some of the storytelling devices he's going to use. The Molly Bloom in this movie comes across as much more intelligent than the one in the book, because I think she's just really rooted in herself and her story. She's a different person altogether.
Well, and that holds true for what we expect out of Sorkin's screenplays, just like Zuckerberg in Social Network. Right. I mean, that's just watching the opening scene in Social Network where, he's on that date and everything falls apart. I mean, it's such a brilliantly written scene that Zuckerberg's like, nothing like that ever happened in my life. It so much speaks to what Sorkin brings to the table as a writer, and how he kind of approaches the world in creating these characters. And I think he looks at it in very much kind of a macroscopic way, where he takes the overall story and he finds the elements that work to kind of create a compelling story. Not just a life story, biopic type of story, but an actual story, and allows himself to adapt it. And I think that's a tricky thing in the land of biopics, because you're always dancing on the fine line of what's true and what's not. But I think more and more people, while they try to keep with as much of the truth as they can, they allow themselves to kind of change some of the facts to fit the story better, and it makes for compelling storytelling when you do it that way. And I think finding the right way to latch onto this character Molly Bloom, and whether she's a more interesting character or not, she certainly is a very compelling character in the film and makes for a really interesting character to watch over the 2+ hours.
How do you think Sorkin would write an unintelligent character? Seriously, this is not something that I thought about before the show, but like as we're going down the list of Sorkin's themes and Sorkin's films and Sorkin's history, even going to The West Wing or those pieces, all of the definitely all the main characters, but we talk about how the perception of Molly when she's telling her own story versus the perception of Molly when Sorkin's telling her story is really like a god of the mind, right? How would he write someone who's unintelligent?
He would have them order an appletini in the bar.
Oh, yes, a good call. Very good. But interestingly enough, so that's a good point that you bring that up, because then you think about I forget his name. I'm going to look it up. But her boss that leads to the game, right? This then they don't give his real name. So, but he's kind of portrayed as powerful but not intelligent, right? I guess that's the way that I would describe it. So interestingly enough, that you bring up a good point, is that people in this film, at least, that are unintelligent all are aggressive.
Yes, it's very much, I think, there's the intellectual civilized person versus like the unintellectual brute. is sort of the two ways that Sorkin sort of divides the world.
Yeah, and we talk about the scene. The thing that prompted me to get this question, Andy, is when you talk about the Zuckerberg scene in Social Network, and is this genius that's being presented through Sorkin's writing a reflection of his own intelligence, which, I mean, I think he's brilliant. I mean, honestly, I love his writing. Is it because he's creating these scenes, is it a reflection of himself in his writing? And that's why we get that piece from when he tells the story of Molly Bloom, when he tells the story of Zuckerberg, because again, that never happened in my life, but it's in the movie about him.
I'd love to see a Sorkin take on elements within my life and exactly, what is it that he pulls out and leaves behind, and to see if I even recognize it by the time I look at it. He's definitely just a fascinating character, the way he does write these people. And maybe it would be an interesting challenge to see him, writing some Coen Brothers-esque idiot characters. They certainly can do very comedic and fun takes on the idiots. But it would be interesting to see someone like Sorkin do it and see how that looked. But looking at these characters, it's such an interesting game that gets played throughout the film, just between our two leads, Jessica Chastain and Idris Elba. Like it's so interesting watching him try to figure out what her game is, and the title can be very much talking about these games that she runs, just as much as it can be talking about her game that she's playing in her life, and he's trying to key in on that. It's fascinating, and you keep seeing these moments as he sees more and more to Molly, and the moment where he's doing his little seat swapping back and forth before he finally commits to Molly when he's at the first trial with her. It's as interesting and compelling a moment as later when they're talking before the judge for the final time, and she's giving her case and pleading guilty and everything, and you have the judge. It's just as much a game, you could almost say, that Idris Elba has, knowing who Judge Foxman is, and how he reacts to things as he's saying, wait for it.
Yeah,
for that final verdict.
Great way to say that. Wait for it. That was awesome.
Yeah, it's just really compelling, and finding the way to play those moments, I find really interesting.
In terms of his direction, I think we're all pretty clear in liking his writing, and I think in general the general public is too, based on his properties out there. This is a directorial debut for Aaron Sorkin. What did you notice there? In for me, I'll say I didn't find anything particularly remarkable about it. I found myself, like, in some of the procedural stuff that was done with the poker stuff, it felt a lot like Aronofsky. The movie in general reminded me to some degree of The Big Short, in the way that its pacing kind of brought things out and things like that. But it seemed generally unremarkable from a direction and production standpoint for me. What am I missing when I feel that way in watching this movie?
I don't think you're missing anything. I think it's, a director that's going to let the story and the performances stand up front, as opposed to letting style draw attention to itself. So for me, there was nothing that I could think of where I thought, oh, that shot really seemed an odd choice, or that camera move really, pulled me out of this scene. The camera, placement, I would say just, very traditional. There were some interesting moves. There was a scene, I think, early on when she's in his office, in Jaffe's office, and she drags the chair over. There's a shot, at least from his desk, that's sort of, she's moving across the frame, and I think from left to right, and then as she passes out of the frame, the camera moves from right to left. There was just some little touches like that I just noticed as, oh, the camera's moving. That's interesting. It didn't draw me out like that's an odd choice. I just thought, oh, that's a nice smooth thing. But yeah, I think in terms of getting the performances, they were all there. the shots were there. Things were structured in a way to balance all sort of the story aspects we thought. So to me, I counted it as a success. First time out of the gate. To me, just really assembled and pulled together, a complete film and did it very well.
Yeah, for me, it was this was a writer director, and so he knows his script incredibly well, obviously. And like Steve said, it's like this is really going to be founded on that screenplay. It's not necessarily going to be full of other directors' tricks. Obviously, he hasn't really built a body of work to kind of create any sort of style. If anything, I think his style has always come from his writing and the strength of kind of the way that he builds his dialogue. And I think what worked for me here is the way that the shooting style kind of allowed for that. And what I think excited me, because at first I was a little nervous. I'm like, Aaron Sorkin's directing a film. Is it going to feel very much like a play, or is it going to be just too allow the camera to sit too much and just really kind of cutting back and forth between people? I think he found a way to keep things moving where it may not have stood out in any unique way, but it never felt dull. There was always interesting stuff happening. Like you said, I mean, just the opening with the bit about the skiing competition. You've got the graphics coming on, talking about the slope, the angles of the slopes. You got the little information jumping back and forth in time about her binding clips and all of that sort of stuff. There's so many little elements that get built into it. And I think as a director, he really tapped into a way to tell an Aaron Sorkin script as effectively as he could, being Aaron Sorkin.
That makes sense too. I think, I think you make a good point in the idea of having the camera set up to see the dialogue, to see the people that are speaking the dialogue. And I think the one point, I didn't really notice those camera moves like you were talking about, Steve, but the one camera shot that I was really impressed with was one that was actually set up to feature Jessica Chastain. And that's in the sort of final rant when Idris Elba is defending her. And it's a fantastic speech giving to the value and the virtue of Molly Bloom. And for the majority of this speech, or for a good portion, I should say, of this speech, the camera is held on Molly, on Jessica Chastain's character, to watch her reaction. And in terms of a film choice to reveal the essence of the story, I thought that was a really smart move. Jessica Chastain did it beautifully. And it was one of the few times in the film, watching from a movie perspective, that I felt that they made a choice that was about a movie being a movie to relate the story. And that's why I feel that way about it. One of the things that is interesting to me about the way I digested this film too is this is the first time in the history of my hosting of the next reel of the Film Board where I watched the show that we're talking about tonight and then watched a different movie in the theater before talking about it. And that's this morning I went and saw I, Tonya, which is out, and it has so many weird, interesting parallels all of a sudden, right? Because we have these two amazing athletes and their stories. I, Tonya is a lot more subjective. It's a lot more, I was really blown away by what I, Tonya was, whereas you talk about Molly's Game being a biopic. In general, when I go to the movies, I'm looking for a little bit more art, I guess, in terms of the movie aspect of it. And I loved the Molly's Game story. I think everything, all the points we're making about the way that the story was told and presented is perfect. That being said, I wanted more. I wanted more art when I came to the movie. So unfortunately, in this perspective, I'm comparing the two, and I think everyone should go see I, Tonya.
That's definitely on my list. It's interesting though, because I mean, comparing it to biopics, the last one that I saw was The Greatest Showman, which I saw after Molly's Game, before we did the show. And that's another interesting biopic in the sense that it's, aside from the fact that it's a musical, it largely it felt very much more kind of just a standard biopic. Aside from the music, which is great, the biopic itself felt fairly standard. It didn't feel any that new or different or anything. and it did have me questioning, how much of this is really based on P.T. Barnum's life, or how much of it is candy coated just to make it work for the musical.
Well, and that, honestly, I didn't have that on my list because I thought it was just a biopic. But when I heard it was a musical, now I'm really excited to go see it.
Oh yeah, no, it's fantastic. The music is what really makes it shine. But it's interesting because biopics are such interesting beasts. They can be something that ends up feeling fairly plodding, because oftentimes with biopics, you get something that's like, well, you've got to kind of journey through their life as they go through these beats, whether it's looking at a longer period of their life, like something like why am I blanking on the name? Ring of Fire? No, the Johnny Cash one. Where it starts where he's young, and it kind of goes through his whole life all the way through, his successes and everything, or something that's so specific to a particular moment, like Lincoln, when Spielberg did that, which is a very particular point in Abraham Lincoln's presidency. It's such an interesting form of film, because by nature of it being a story about someone's life, it can fall into some kind of storytelling tropes that leave it to being, first this happened, then this happened, then this. And I haven't seen I, Tonya yet, but where I think that some of them do hit that, I felt that it was the structure of this that pulled it out of the standard tropes that it could have fallen into, and made it stand out and shine as a much greater story.
Well, I think that gets into the two reasons people go to see or at least the two ways to tell a biopic, which is to tell who a person is by what they did, which gets sort of in that plotting where it's like, here's all these things this person did, versus those that are about who is this person and why are they the type of person they are, or what is the merit in telling their story because it's about what they stand for or believe in. And I think that's what Sorkin, to me, what I appreciate about his, whether it's this or The Social Network, it's like everybody knows what Zuckerberg did, but what's compelling about that story? Why do people watch that story? Who is he, or why did he do it? What pushed him? And it's about getting inside the character, not so much the external events and the chronology of what happened to them, because with most of these, Sorkin adaptations, we know who these people are. People know who Steve Jobs is. What drives them? What has pushed them to make these decisions? And I think that's, to me, the compelling case. Even though a lot of people may not know who Molly Bloom is, to me, what I kept finding myself asking as I was watching this is why did Aaron Sorkin want to tell this story? Because it's not so much about poker and Hollywood. There's, what is he trying to tell us about who she is, or what judgment should we pass on her as a person? So what is the redeeming qualities of this person? And to me, that was the really compelling part of a good biopic, is sort of getting into the heart of the character and understanding their motivations to either redeem them or condemn them one way or another based on what they've done.
Well, and I think he did all of that really well and in a creative way. I think an Oscar nomination is coming for both Sorkin and Chastain on this. Do you think that there are other nominations that might come out, and do you disagree with that statement?
I think it's entirely possible. Elba would be nominated as supporting actor. I think that he's, delivers just a lot of great stuff in it. But I mean, for me, it really is Chastain's film. She not only can handle Sorkin's script and everything, she knows how to play really compelling female characters, and is just so interesting to watch on screen, because you can tell there's a lot going on in there. And I didn't realize this, but this is Sorkin's first project with a female protagonist, and
that's interesting.
It actually makes it really interesting that he chose to tell this story about this woman dealing with kind of the struggles that she has finding her place in otherwise kind of a man's world and everything.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. It's great, and Jessica Chastain's the perfect person to play that role.
Absolutely.
Other people in the movie, we mentioned Idris Elba. I thought he was great too. I know that Costner is a very controversial figure in Next Reel lore.
Yeah, Pete always has issues with him. I love Kevin Costner. I always have. And again, like I said, the sequences with Molly and her father, particularly at the ice rink, I just feel there's so much strength there, and I love the way that Kevin Costner plays that. He's an interesting father figure in this particular film, and for me, he is just spot on brilliant.
Did you guys see Draft Day? Do you guys care about football at all?
Yes, I saw that one. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I actually compare his performance here to Draft Day, and I really liked Draft Day. I think I agree with you, Andy. I think there is a time and a place for Costner in the world, and this was a good one for him. His stoic nature early in the film fits right into where he belongs, and I thought he delivered the emotional stuff really well. It was very compelling to me.
Yeah, the father-daughter moment, just kind of acknowledging acknowledging the difficulty of why he was so hard on her because of what she saw as a child. Like when that came out, it's one of those just moments that breaks you. It's just I don't know. It really worked for me.
Yep, it worked for me too. The rest of the cast, Michael Cera as Tobey Maguire. We're listing here.
Yeah.
I'm not a major Tobey Maguire fan. I liked Michael Cera in the role. I guess I understand what he was doing, especially if he knew it was Tobey Maguire. How did you guys feel about Player X?
It's interesting. On Wikipedia, it says that Player X is actually a composite character of Leonardo DiCaprio, Tobey Maguire, Ben Affleck, and some of the other real-life celebrity poker players. So I don't know how much he's pulling particularly from Tobey Maguire, but I do find it a really interesting character. And what I loved about the way Michael Cera played it is, he's such a lovable actor. I love watching him, but that moment when that final phone call when he tells her what's what, man, that was quite a moment.
I also put Chris O'Dowd on this list. He's the guy that was sort of the drunk, right? The detective story that started everything with the detective story. Douglas Downey is his name.
Drunk Irishman.
Yeah,
yes,
he's the only Irish guy and mistakes Molly for being Irish. I actually liked his role. I thought that was good. I guess maybe we could put him in the list of people that maybe are an unintelligent character that Sorkin's written. But I thought he was great. He's also the boyfriend from Bridesmaids,
right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If you go back, yeah. I really liked him. I thought he carried what he did. He didn't have a whole lot to do, but what he was doing there I thought was pretty special.
Well, he has an important part in the story, and so it's, I think, interesting that we get to meet some of the players, but we do get a little bit more, about him. And you think it's perhaps just because, he's going to be one of those guys who's like, oh, Molly, I love you. So you think it's about the barrier, that she tries to create between herself and the players, that this isn't going to get personal. And you think it's just another one of those stories. And then to realize that, no, there's much more to his character, or he's much more important to her story in terms of, the FBI, his past, all of that coming to play, which I was not expecting, but it was nice because that could, that explains perhaps, the way he's behaving. And I thought he did just a nice job of playing that the drunk that will just sort of like ramble, not finish his sentences. Everybody knows that guy. Just entertaining, one of those guys you laugh at because of the tragedy in his life, right. I guess.
Yeah, no, I thought he was great. Any other the character actors in the cast you guys want to talk about? I liked Graham Greene as the judge. I thought he had a subtle turn from a stone face to actually revealing the sort of the special moment for the end of the film. I liked seeing him there. He's great.
It's always great seeing him pop up in whatever it is. And we're going to be talking about him later this week in our Die Hard 3 episode. So it's always nice to see him popping up in films when he's out there.
So for the theater experience, sometimes we talk about the different things that we said. I made the joke to the box office when I bought the tickets. I'm like, dang it, I missed the 3D version. Did you, I was just joking, but did you guys, I didn't really feel like theater experience mattered too much on this film.
I don't know if I would say that it was a big film to see. It has to be seen theatrically or anything like that. But what I did find is watching it in a full auditorium, there were, I don't know. I guess it was one of those movies where it was nice having an audience to get those audible reactions when things happened, like all the skiing stuff at the beginning, or some of the moments that happen throughout the film when you hear somebody gasp in the theater, or, say something because they're shocked. There's something for me that I always appreciate that theatrical experience because of those sorts of moments, because it just enhances the kind of the way that some of those moments play out.
Yeah, I agree with that. My theater was pretty empty. I was the late show on Friday night for it. So
I had a late afternoon show. So I had I think the older audience that was seeing this and then going out for early dinner. So there's the only memorable there. I agree with Andy. There were some of those like gasps, with the ski accident, that it just gives you that sort of permission to be, a little bit more expressive with your emotional reactions. But there's a point in the near the end where Jaffe says to Molly, so you finally got around to reading The Crucible. And then the couple behind me is like, did you ever read that? No, but I saw the movie. And I was like, oh, do you need to have this conversation right now? Can you wait till after the movie, please?
And that particular sequence that you're talking about, Steve, is great Sorkin and a perfect reveal about their the characters' relationship. I really liked that. I remember that being special, again, in terms of dialogue, in terms of story. The way that Sorkin tells a story, I thought that was awesome, especially with the idea of the witch hunt and how it related to the story as a whole. I thought that was perfect. Speaking of the box office, it's showing up as 9.5 million thus far as of yesterday, so as of January 5th, and a $30 million budget. Does that mean anything to this movie? Probably not, thinking about why it was getting made and what it potentially can do for the people involved with the movie. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's only just opened much wider, right? I'm not. Did
you guys have it on Christmas? We had it on Christmas here in Oregon.
We did, yes. So yeah, okay. I saw that, and so I felt like it was actually a pretty wide release actually on Christmas. Yeah, everything I see just shows Christmas as its opening day. So I think it is limited. You're right, limited December 25th. Wide January 5th, but I don't know how much wider they needed to go. It just felt like it was pretty wide. I mean, it was in plenty of theaters. I saw it the 28th.
I agree, and I guess that's the only reason why the number is surprising to me. I would have thought it was closer, at least to breaking even at this point. I think the movie's going to end up making money, but the point of it is it feels low right now to me in terms of return based on the Christmas release.
Well, now that I look at it over on Box Office Mojo, it actually only opened in 271 theaters. Just this past Friday, January 5th, it opened. It's now playing at 1608 theaters. So it has done quite a jump there. But that being said, this is one of those movies where I wonder how much bigger it's going to get. Is this going to really draw the audiences in, or is this one of those kind of, Miss Sloane type of dramas that might not be able to find its audience unless it gets some of the award nominations? Oftentimes, I think you find that it really needs those to draw those audiences in when it's a drama like this.
And I will say for that, Steve and I did Trailer Rewind for Miss Sloane, and it is a tragedy that more people did not see that movie.
Absolutely.
If there is any other movie on Trailer Rewind, and we do a lot of them that deserve a wider viewership, I am evangelizing Miss Sloane to the world because it is a very special movie. And you talk about a poker game. That movie is told in the way of like The Usual Suspects. It's another one of Jessica Chastain's gems out there, and everyone should go see it.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's the only person who got a Golden Globe nomination from the film. So no one else, no one behind the scenes or no other performances. So
gotcha. Well, in closing, is there anything else that you guys want to say about this one in terms of what else might we be missing? Who should go see Molly's Game?
It's a compelling character story, regardless of whether you're interested in poker or who Molly is. I find it such an interesting journey through kind of this world that she's trying to build for herself. I was really moved by the film. I felt like Molly, the story as played by Jessica Chastain, was just incredibly strong, and it really hit me in all the right ways. This is a movie that I think people would be interested in. I mean, it's 2+ hours, but in no way did it ever feel slow. It always moved at a great clip, I felt. And it's just a really strong piece about, life and the things that it throws at you. You can be as good as Molly on these ski courses, but it can be something so inane as a frozen pine branch that throws you for a loop and ruins all your chances of being a winner. I just found it to be an incredibly well-told story, and it was exciting to see Aaron Sorkin bring it to the screen.
So, JJ, I'm going through my notes. I see there's one little artful thing I did note that I forgot to mention earlier. Cool. When she is in her apartment and gets roughed up by I think of the Italian mafia.
That was a tough scene. The way
I know you probably had a hard time with that scene. The sound during that sequence, because she's there at her door, when she's just sort of there semi-conscious, and there's a thump of the newspaper being delivered, and then we get a montage of her over the next 2 weeks as she's holed up in her apartment, and if you listen, you will hear periodically the thump of another newspaper being delivered, and it's just sort of there in the background as that scene plays out, to sort of be another cue to the passage of time, which I thought was one of those little unexpected, treats that I appreciated in the film. So I wanted to point that out. And yeah, I'm right there with Andy on this one. I think it's a movie that if you expect a poker movie, you're going to be disappointed, but this is so much more than that. And I'm, going to echo his statements. This is a great story about, the ability to get up after life knocks you down. And, are you going to be the victim in this, or are you going to, stand up and be yourself and live your life? And it's just a really powerful story, very well told. And I hope people go out and see this, because it doesn't need to be seen on the big screen, but audiences need to show up to support movies like this so that we get more movies like this. It's in that weird, box office budget range where it's not the huge, $100 million, and it's not the small independent. It's in that mid range, and people need to show up to support, great art like this with great performances so that we get more stories like this.
I think that's fair. And along those lines, I, Tonya was made for $11 million. So go out and see it if you haven't had a chance to. Now is the time that we are going to rank it. We talk about it on every show, but if you haven't done so yet, check out www.flickchart.com. I've been adding a lot there lately. It provides a fun way to look at movies that you've consumed by creating a tournament-style stack ranking system, and it organizes your personal audience preferences in a sometimes awesome, sometimes wacky, but always interesting way. The movies that we've talked about on this show can be seen ranked at flickchart.com/TNR Film Board. So, Andy, where do we start?
We're going to kick it off here, but before we do, I do need to correct something I just said. Aaron Sorkin was nominated for Best Screenplay at the Golden Globes. So,
good. And I think that I mean, honestly, when we were talking about it, I think that's kind of the assumption, I guess, going in to this movie, and what you come out of it with is that Chastain and Sorkin are definitely the ones that are leading the charge and deserving of awards for it.
Definitely. So we'll see how that plays out. All right. First up, we have Molly's Game or Side Effects. Molly's Game for me.
Side Effects.
Oh, definitely. Oh, Molly's Game.
I'm a Soderbergh honk, so.
Molly's Game or Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Molly's Game for me.
I think I'm Molly's Game too.
Okay. Yeah.
Molly's Game or Get Out. That's a tough one. Get Out for me.
Oh. JJ, did you see Get Out?
I did not.
Did you survive that? You did.
Still afraid of it.
You did not see Get Out, did you?
It's definitely one you should see. There's so much more going on there.
I need an ally and I need the lights on, but I'm going to do it.
Oh gosh, that was such a interesting and unique film with something. Oh gosh, but I'm probably going to go with Andy, and it's probably the thrill of the recency of it, because I have not seen Get Out since, what was that, last February? So it's been almost a year. But yeah, I'll go with Molly's Game.
I went with
Andy
Get Out.
said Get Out, actually.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay, then I guess we're gonna.
We're gonna have to rock paper scissors.
I guess we're gonna. Oh no. Okay. How do we do this?
All right, so we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, and then we'll say it, but we'll go like rock, paper, scissors, rock, and we just keep doing it until we
keep going
until we somebody wins. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, rock.
Paper.
Oh, you took it.
So Molly's game wins.
Molly's game wins. Molly's game or Logan?
Logan
for me.
Yeah.
Those are like two of my top films for 2017, and Molly's Game's up there too, but not above those two. Molly's Game or Edge of Tomorrow?
Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow for me.
Okay.
We're just decisive, Steve. It's not.
Yeah, that's fine. I have no quibbles with those decisions.
All right, Molly's Game or Kingsman: The Secret Service?
That's the first one. I'll say Kingsman.
I'm gonna say Molly's Game.
I am going to say Molly's Game.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
I will always side on the more serious artfulness side because of the, I think, enduring, seriousness of masterful art over, yes, and pure entertainment is fun, but I always prefer the art.
Sure. Well, that puts Molly's Game at number 7 out of 66 on our chart.
Okay.
It made it into the top 10. It's only behind Star Wars: The Last Jedi, Logan, and Logan. Those are really the only two 2017 films that it is behind. So
okay,
that's really good.
Yeah.
Quite a good slot. Yeah.
For the Letterboxd ranking on it, I'm going to put it as a 2.5. It's right in the middle for me.
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. It's right in the middle. It's 2.5.
Is that 2.5 with a like?
It's like
with a like. Exactly. It's similar to so exactly. If we go back to what I've done on the film board recently, The Last Jedi was a 3 and a like, and Murder on the Orient Express was a 2.5 and a like. While I had lots of problems with Murder on the Orient Express, actually they're kind of like opposite sides of a similar coin in that Murder on the Orient Express had a bunch of art from a film perspective, but the story was tough for me, and this is in the reverse. So that's why I put it right in the middle. I think it's unremarkable as a film but it's a great story. So it's a 2.5 with a like.
Okay, because I was going to go 4.5.
You should.
And
it's number 7 on our chart.
Take that.
We're being consistent. It's good.
And I'm at a 5 and a like. This
wow.
This really was pretty perfect for me.
I'll tell you, I was a 3 until I saw I, Tanya. Okay. All right, so what's next? Where do we go from here? Next month, Film Board is going to go back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the Black Panther coming out in February, which is I'm actually really excited about. What was the last Marvel movie we saw? Do you guys remember? We skipped Thor Ragnarok, which I saw, but we didn't talk about it on the show.
And we skipped Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
But there's one in between there. I feel like I don't know. I need to go back.
Was
and
it Doctor Strange? I feel like it might have been.
It might have been, and that was great.
Doctor Strange, yeah.
So I'm excited for Black Panther, and I'm excited to talk about it with you guys.
It's going to be fun, yeah.
Yeah, next reel, the main show, the weekly show. Right now, you guys are thick in Die Hard, right?
We are. Later this week, we'll be chatting about Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Oh.
Which is John McTiernan's return to the franchise. So it should be a fun one to chat about.
Very cool. We got our fresh new start here with this one, and we already spoiled one for 2018. What's the new movie that you guys are looking forward to most this year? Steve?
Oh, it's probably going to be, I'm going to be a Spielberg fanboy and say Ready Player One, because I'm looking forward to him being back in the seat and just having a ridiculously fun time with being an adolescent again. So I'm just really looking forward to that one.
Gotcha. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, that one's pretty high up on my list of films I'm excited for. Ready Player One, but there are a lot of really interesting looking films coming out this year. So I'm pretty excited. I think it's going to be a nice year. At least I'd like to think of it that way. So we'll see.
Awesome. I'm particularly excited about Ocean's 8. Because my aforementioned Soderbergh love, I'm just excited for that franchise to get back started again. I loved those movies. I loved them all, even the ones that most people didn't like. So I'm really excited to see what they do with the women's group coming out for the Ocean's franchise.
Did you hear that Steven Soderbergh has watched Ocean's 8 9 times already?
No, I did not. That's awesome.
At the end of the year, he will post on his website. He's got a section of his website dedicated to his daily journal that he releases at the end of the year of every movie he's watched, book he's read, or play, or TV show. And I don't know if it's the full movie or if he was just screening dailies or whatever, but apparently Ocean's 8 shows up on that list 9 times. So he's been at least watching it from, I don't know how much influence he's had, but at least he's been observing and watching Ocean's
Very
8.
cool. And, honestly, I really agree with Andy. This year looks really great. Our schedule, even for the first 6 months of the year, I'm very excited for every movie that we're going to watch. You mentioned Ready Player One. We'll be doing that in March. So it's going to be a really great year. Everyone out there who's listening, let us know what movies you're excited about for this year. Come visit us on Facebook and Twitter. And like I said, I super like Instagram now, too, so we can figure out a way to be there. We're posting what we're doing on a weekly basis there on that social media platform. Also, please support us as a patron on patreon.com/the next reel. You'll get a lot for very little, as little as $1 a month, and every little bit helps us keep doing this at the next reel. When the movie ends, our conversation begins. Till next.